So we are lucky to have Patrick, which I'm sure everyone knows. Patrick Handley is going to talk about how hot buttons derail our spirituality, which I think is going to be right on target for many of us. Um, so, although I think everybody knows Patrick, I'm not sure everybody knows his history. He's a licensed psychologist and interfaith minister ordained by the New Seminary in New York City in 1996. He is a personality assessment specialist and created the Insight Institute. Um, and I think many of us have gotten information along those lines from him in the past. His work with organizations is dedicated to helping people integrate the personality strengths and spirituality into their work, school, and personal relationships. He's also got two books, Insight into Your Unique Personality and Leads to the Insight of a Leadership Guide and Bringing Your Best. So,
And I'd like to add that he is a talented horse manager and trainer.
and an amazing artist.
Yes.
So, without going on and on and on, Patrick, please.
Okay, take it away. Thank you. Well, I look forward to joining you guys and talking. First of all, because as you see, I work a lot with organizations, and when participants in those programs attend, they are sent to the program on how to resolve a conflict or get along with others. They're not necessarily volunteer participants, and so you guys are at least all open-minded, and plus you all have comments. So that's a part of what I want to work in this morning. So as we go through materials, I've got some spots where we can stop and get feedback. So this will be fun. So I'm going to share the slides here and turn those on. And I have a lot of slides because when I present in organizations, again, my challenge is you got to keep people entertained and off their phones and off their computers. And so by switching, but they're not slides that you read. They're mostly just pictures. So they're just ways to kind of go along. So let me open that up and share those. Okay. So I picked the name here. Can all of you see that okay? And you still see me, and you can set your gallery view to see each other if you wish. So I titled this How Triggers and Hot Buttons Derail Spirituality. And here's an image. It's actually right on our website. All those nice candles burning in their light. And so one way I think about spirituality is we want to gain it. And that's our whole purpose of tending, whatever spiritual thing we do once a week, if that, Center for Universal Oneness, Unity, churches. So we want to gain spiritual. We want to get into a peaceful place. Then our goal then is to maintain that and then retain it or regain it if we lose it. And so most of the presentations are all about gaining it and how to meditate better and how to focus on prayer. So today I'm going to take a little different path and say, what throws you out of it? Once you've gained it, you've got all that peace, you've heard this wonderful presentation, and you walk out of the room and you lose it. So the way I look at it, the two sides there, but just kind of split those off in a minute. So the spiritual side, when we gain that, we're in a loving place, forgiving, we compassionate toward others, we respond to them with mindfulness, we're peaceful, we're in a helpful spot, we're giving to others. But when we get triggered, we drop to the dark side, sometimes I call it, or we get derailed. And then we fall into a fearful place, or instead of forgiving, we get accusing. You made me do this. You made a mistake. We get reactive, upset, angry, all those types of things. So this is what I'm talking about, this switch. What happens? What keeps us from not just staying in that good spiritual place? So here's a fun image. It's like right after we leave church, someone cuts us off in the highway, and this lady is pointing like, what were you thinking? She's really saying, what is the other person thinking? They're being an idiot. They're driving crazy. They cut us off, and now we're angry, we're upset. But I want to shift that focus, and I've got that you capitalized there. So really, it's like, what was she thinking? Because that's where we have our powers, controlling what we're thinking. So it's a brain thing. And what I want to do is kind of introduce a way to think about where the brain goes when it gets triggered. And some of those will hopefully kind of light you up just like this and say, oh, I do that, or that's a pattern, or if I can get better at catching that, then I can stay longer where I want to be, and that's in that spiritual, peaceful place. So I have a little story to start with. It's about turkeys. It's about my son. So all of you have seen wild turkeys around. There's a lot of them on our property here. And they go around in the summer and eat a lot, and then they get big and puffy, and their mating season comes along, and then next thing you know, there's a fight and all that type of thing. So here's an image that kind of reminds me of my son Shay, and he was about 3 or 4 years old. So I was here in my office at home working, and he comes running in the house. He says, "Daddy, Daddy, the wild turkeys are chasing me. They're after me." I said, "Oh, Shay," I was kind of busy, so I was thinking about work. And so I said, "Just go back out there and yell at them, or flap your arms at them. They'll run off." So he goes out, and he must have done something. He comes right in, and he's even more terrified and scared. And Daddy, Daddy, now they're chasing me, that one great big one, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, and I went out there and with him the next time, and they ran off. And I said, "Oh, there you go." But then I got to thinking about, what did I do? I sent him out there, and I got to looking at, he had a dark jacket on. He had this red zipper section in the front, about like this image. And I told him, just go out there and flap your arms. And so how did he really look to that turkey? Well, at that time in that year, at that moment, wild turkeys are triggered not by each other's presence, but by that red gobbler. That in their brain, they don't have a very big brain to start with, but their brain gets triggered to do what? To fight, that it's mating season. So it's probably very true. I sent Shay out there to just act like a wild turkey himself, and he was about 3 foot tall, and to that turkey, he looked like a turkey. And the turkey was what? Triggered. Its brain was no longer thinking, this is a human that might have a BB gun, or worse yet, a hunter. All it was thinking was small brown creature with flapping arms, and the goal is to attack. It wasn't long after that I saw this cartoon. This is a Norman Rockwell painting. Some of you may have seen it. It kind of reminded me of this scene. So I felt kind of like a poor father. I sent him out there to be attacked by a turkey. And but that really got me thinking about, what are these triggers, and what are the triggers we have as humans? And we've got a lot. So here's how I define them. So triggers are behaviors, mannerisms, situations that triggered you to act without thinking. And that last sentence is the important part. You're acting without thinking. Something has taken you to a spot that you are not being mindful, you're not being peaceful, you're not being spiritual. All of a sudden, bang, you are gone down a different trail. And hot buttons are very similar in a sense. They're sensitive memories, emotional topics, issues that cause you to just snap to an old learned reaction, something you picked up in childhood or earlier in life. And we're going to talk about these and share some, but let me set this up. So I think of there being kind of 4 general types of triggers, and I like things that are memorable, so I name these innate, trait, fate, state. They all kind of rhyme. So innate, or these are instincts of humans. This is how we're all similar. We've probably all got some of these triggers. Traits are how we're different, personalities or body type, physical characteristics, all that. That's the world of psychology. Fate, that's our history. We're all different, got different backgrounds, different experiences. Sometimes the smallest experience in grade school can become a big trigger. It's just that others don't know it, but you remember it, you know it. And then state is just our daily emotions, energy. Some days we're more triggerable than other days. Some days we just don't have much resilience. We're kind of wore out, and anything can kind of make us snap. And then where we snap back is one of those other ones. So let's walk through a couple of these. You saw the slide there, but so innate. One thing about humans as we evolved in tribes and in history is we needed to avoid dying. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? We don't want to get killed. So we want to avoid being eaten. So we have triggers around loud noises, particularly something that sounds like a roar, bitten by insects, spiders, vermin, mice, wounded, poisoned. So we have a lot of triggers in here that, thank goodness, our brain doesn't have to think. We don't have to pause. There's a loud roar or a spider drops down on our neck. This picture gives people shivers sometimes. They think, oh my gosh, I would be out of there so fast, because we had to be out of there so fast. We couldn't stop and think, well, oh, this is a wolf spider, and wolf spiders really don't bite humans. They're not poisonous. But how many of you can think is, if that landed on your neck, crawled up there, you would not even think, you would jump up and be gone. There's lots of funny videos on YouTube, and they call them prank videos, YouTube, TikTok, where someone's got a spider on a monofilament string and they reach out and they drop it over somebody that's sitting on a park bench, and that person jumps up and runs off and falls over themselves and all those types of things. And so if you ever want to see some funny things, you can watch those. But those are all about getting someone triggered by something that's in our human history. So here's a lady on a chair. This could be Melanie. If there's somebody even says the word mouse, she's out of there. And for a lot of us, we are. So why are we so scared? This is even a little plastic mouse. One time in a corporate setting, when I was doing a seminar, I had a little mouse on a string and I pulled it across the floor. And boy, people panicked and ran out of there. I thought, oh, I shouldn't do that. That was a little, it's like a mouse isn't a trigger for me, but for some people, it's a massive trigger. You know, they just can't stand the idea of getting a mouse run over their foot, or worse yet, up their leg or something like that. So, okay, let me keep going here. Okay, so innate social needs. This is where I want our brain kind of to go this morning, because we're all social creatures. We all have those physical triggers, but social triggers are a little different. They are the ones that happen when we are around others or interacting, family, friends, work groups. So the research in social anthropology shows that we've got these three big social needs, and they're all almost innate in most people. That is, to get into a group, to be accepted, because in primitive times we couldn't survive without being a part of a group. To remain in the group, once we get in, we want to stay in, find a role, a sense of purpose. Some people became warriors, some people became medicine man. That's probably what I would have been, because I had poor vision as a kid, so I couldn't have gone out there and captured an antelope, because I would say, where is the antelope? Some end up being nurturers. There's all kinds of roles in groups, but we want to be important to the group, and that's a way of remaining in the group. And we want to stay safe, and then we participate with the group in protecting our territory. And there's a lot of triggers that we have around these. They still exist in, you know, every work group I've gone into. There's an issue getting in the team, staying in the team. What's my role? How important am I to the team? How do I stay safe, which means keeping my job? Some of you may remember even in grade school some triggers around this area. You know, you want to be in the in group. Little girls mature psychologically faster than boys. A lot of times little boys are kind of clueless about groups and that type of thing, but little girls pretty quickly learn the power of different groups. And so, yeah, some of you may remember there are times when, like, wow, it really hurt not to be in the group. There's even movies about this, you know, like the Mean Girls and the so this little boy is feeling left out. So that's a normal, natural trigger. It's kind of built into us, and it can be very sensitive at times. So you could be in a peaceful place in your church service and walk out in the lobby to have coffee afterwards with the participants in the church and feel left out of a certain group, or kind of shunned by a group, or ignored by someone. And that'll pop in so fast you won't even catch it. And now you're thinking, about that dynamic rather than staying in that mindful, peaceful place that you were in the service. So as we go on with this presentation this morning, it's okay to think back to your childhood and say, man, do I have some leftover triggers back then and from the second grade when I felt left out or felt excluded or something happened and it's a trigger for me. That would be in the fate category. Okay, keep rolling along here. That slide is not wanting to advance here. Okay. Okay, trait. Well, I'm not going to spend much time here, but that's these are triggers that simply relate to gender, race, height, weight, personality. We all have different traits that can also be triggers. If you like to be in charge and someone dismisses you, that could be a hot button trigger because you don't like to be dismissed. You like to be in charge. Or if you like to be in, you like things neat and organized, and that's a personality trait, and someone leaves things disorganized, you might feel that's dismissive of you, and that could trigger something. So think about those as we talk about these. A real hot one, or fate, what I call fate, is background. So here you think about, geez, what family were you raised in? What reactions, maybe you even remodeled, like say, we McGillicuddies, we don't take nothing off of nobody, you know, and you've got a fight trait. As soon as someone dismisses you, the McGillicuddy culture kicks in and you say, that's fighting. And so you're no longer in the church space, as I call it, that peaceful spot. You're ready to fight for the McGillicuddies. And you know, what a difference we have from there's my two little images up there. There's the happy suburban Calvin American family culture, but they could have all kinds of issues. There could be some dysfunction in every family. There's dysfunction somewhere here and there, and birthplace and roles and all those things. And yet we're so fortunate in some ways. We're not in an impoverished country or struggling on the street. And yet all those things enter in. The school you went to, if you were in the military, a job you had, all of those things are in that category that none of us know about except you. See, this is your fate. This is your history. So you may get triggered by something that's really a hot button for you, but the other person doesn't even get it because they came from a different background. They had different work experience, different life experience. And so sometimes when our triggers go off, others around you are like, what? They don't realize that that was such a issue for you. So we're going to talk too about, you know, how to let other people know what your triggers are. And then state, that's again, where if you had a good day, a bad day. Way I think of it a lot of times is if you're in a tired or wore out state, those other triggers become more sensitive. They fire faster. Those hot buttons fly. So if you're tired, it's easier to get short-tempered. You know, when you got good energy and you just had a chocolate malt or whatever, that might not be a good example. You're probably in a pretty good place. But if you're tired and exhausted and hungry, and some people say, I'm getting gritchy here, if somebody doesn't feed me quick, I'm going to go off on I'm going to be sensitive to things that I'm not normally sensitive to. I could blow at any minute. And I know our son Shay, when he was little, boy, if we didn't feed him at a certain time, he was very triggered. You know, he would get hot, upset, and you couldn't hardly calm him down because he had to be fed on a regular schedule. So, okay, so we're going to talk about, so now you got a sense of your awareness. And let's talk about that. This is a big, if we just get through this part today, we're doing good and say, okay, I'm more aware of my triggers. And I want you to be able to say at some point, and I'm going to be able to laugh at my triggers, and I'm going to be able to laugh at my family's triggers and joke and point those out, not take them so sensitive, because that's how we get better at catching ourselves. By the way, when I say catching ourselves, other people usually know your triggers better than you do. One time in an organization, I started out and I had some blank paper and I was going to have everybody list their triggers, and then we were going to go in. Well, shoot, I must have had the perfect group because nobody listed anything. They were like, well, what the heck happened here? Is everybody perfect? Nobody's got any triggers. Oh, no, I'm fine. I've been working on myself all my life. I got my triggers all worked out. And then the person next to him would say, oh, that's not necessarily the case. I know a trigger or two. And if you really wanted to know a trigger or two of yours, just ask your spouse or a family member or more challenging yet, ask one of your kids, because they can really point them out. Oh yeah, Dad, anybody does this, you go crazy, or anybody does this, you react this way, because others see your triggers because they've learned to either navigate them, walk around them, ignore them, whatever. But so when I'm going to list some here, and I just want you to think, okay, is this one of mine or not? You don't have to admit right now. In our talk later, we can share a little bit about which one's really in it for you. So how about criticism? Somebody says something critical to you, corrects the way you were doing something. You say, oh, I'm in a peaceful place and not let it bother you, or does that click for you? And why does it click? Eventually we want to say, I want to understand why that. Somebody nitpicks some little thing you do, or they find fault with it. You say, boy, I hate that when someone does that. Or perhaps looking down at you. So what's that? If someone's acting superior or looking down or being condescending, that could very quickly trip that old innate thing about being in a group. What do you want to get in the group? You want to stay in the group? If someone's looking down, that's kind of implying that they're not going to endorse you staying in their group. Or if they're superior, then you don't.
Melanie's gone around the corner to tell.
Okay. I was gonna say, I've never had someone just disappear, so that's new.
Yeah. Patrick is.
He got severely triggered.
Whoa. That's great. Interesting that Patrick could just come right back to where Melanie was, but no slides.
He said he was using a different laptop than he normally does, so
Yeah,
maybe
he's aware, so he's trying to get it fixed. So he's working on it.
Exactly where you were going.
You
I
can
thought I
just tell him
clicked
to
the stop
relax.
video, but
Tell him to relax. We're just chatting among ourselves.
Or better yet,
When
tell us
you're-
his biggest trigger and we can give him
Oh,
that when he
yeah.
comes back.
When you are a professional facilitator and something like this happens, that's a trigger.
Well,
well, let's ask Patrick if he got triggered.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a test. I was going to see if any of you guys got
good comeback.
Look, if he can't run his own computer, the battery went dead just instantly right there or something.
I thought it was just an experiment to see who was going to get triggered by that.
Yeah, that's very right, Doug. You're right, Doug. That's perfect
Abandonment
answer.
issues.
Okay. Yeah, abandonment triggered all of us. Good Lordy. Okay. Okay. All right, let's hit some more of these. I'm being ignored. I just ignored all of you. I went away. And somebody looking away while you're talking. I still remember when I had my first teaching job, and I wasn't any older than the kids. I was like 22 years old, and this great big football player was in the hallway, and he wasn't supposed to be, and he'd probably been in the bathroom smoking. We thought smoking was a bad thing at the time. Cigarettes, that is. And he just turned and walked away when I asked him for his hall pass. And I remembered being so angry, but he was twice my size and he looked older than me. And I thought, well, it's not worth the fight. But I looked back on that. I was brooding about that for hours after that. How could that kid be so insubordinate and blah, 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 blah. And I had myself all upset. He just walked on down the hall perfectly. And he was in a spiritual place, probably very peaceful. Yeah. Someone that doesn't appear to be listening to you, they get on their phone. That's a trigger for some of us, particularly as we get older, because kids are on their phone all the time. I've learned when I present to universities, don't even say, one time I said something to someone, they had the computer open, they were typing away, and I thought, well, how could you be so inattentive to me? I'm doing all this work presenting, and I went up and said something, do you mind? And they said, oh, I'm taking notes, I'm writing down what you're saying. And I'm like, oh, geez, my trigger was completely off base. And I thought, well, you're the only one taking notes, and I said something to you, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. Walking away, cold shoulder, indifference, all those types of things. I just want you to think, okay, are any of those triggers that if someone did it to you after a spiritual place, you just meditated, does that trigger you, and where do you go? Okay. Oh, here's one I know. Someone rolling their eyeballs, because Melanie can speak up to that one. She
I
fired
claim that
someone
one.
one time. They got fired their first day on the job. I don't know, or something.
That's a little exaggeration.
Well, the best stories, but she did get in trouble. She rolled her eyeballs when Melanie was speaking in a team meeting or something. And yeah, I think her job didn't last very long. But what is rolling eyeballs? That there's a message. See, all these triggers have a message behind it that we're interpreting a certain way. If it meant nothing to us, we would pay no attention to us. But we're probably saying, oh, that person doesn't respect me. So that person, and I hate being not respected. And I remember in the 4th grade not being respected for something I did. And so it trails back. And so part of learning to live with each other and enjoy each other's learning each other's triggers and then some not doing them. Okay, so in the understanding, I'm just going to hit this briefly. So it's the same 4 things, and we can learn a lot from each other. So when we do our coffee talk or a little sharing later, part of our experience in being a spiritual community is understanding where other people's triggers are, where they may come from, and being compassionate about that, rather than telling them to change. See, our pattern is like, well, you shouldn't be that way. Don't be so sensitive. I didn't mean anything by that. But if it's their trigger, they have a right to their trigger. Even though when I look at this picture, by the way, it really irritates me. So I went to my 50th high school graduation several years ago, and they had a bunch of pictures out, and here's one. I'm looking at that and say, oh, there's all the gang. And I'm looking at it and looking at it and saying, oh, I'm not there. And it kind of triggered me. I was a farm kid. I lived out on the farm. The city kids were always getting together, having parties, and they were the in group. And I just felt all of a sudden like I was 8 years old, because I said, I'm not there. I didn't get invited. I can't believe. And then I started to get angry and said, I knew they were meeting and not inviting. And so my little child came back, and that's how quickly it can happen. Because look, I didn't even get, what is that, a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi they got up there? And so to this day, I hate being left out of groups. Now, a lot of times I don't want to be in the group. I just want to be invited, if that makes sense to any of you. So my trigger is when I find out a group of people are getting together and they didn't even invite me. I thought, well, what did I do? Well, I'm being 8 years old. I'm reacting to something that happened years ago. So I'm going to quit looking at that picture because that bugs me. But some of you might relate. So Melanie's attending today, and I was going to tell this, was probably exaggerated, but we had a water hose experience, and some of you may have had this as a couple. So I triggered Melanie's trigger. She can defend herself now that she's here, but there was a group of people coming over the house, and there was a water hose. Melanie had watered her flowers and left it laying there on the walk. So I looked out the window and in a helpful manner thought, oh, I'll point this out to her. I said, well, you left the water hose out there on the steps and somebody might trip over it. I probably said it even more diplomatically than that. But however it came across, we had Houston, we have liftoff, because I sounded like her mother or something from her past, and that was a big deal. Like, if you want that water hose put away, you can just do it yourself, or why don't you help doing this, or whatever it was. But she was upset. Do you even remember that, Melanie? You're laughing.
I do remember that, yes. I do remember that.
That wasn't one of our loving spiritual moments as a couple. And it was over such a little deal. It's such a little.
And I did have liftoff. I don't know exactly what got triggered, but I definitely had liftoff, and I definitely was triggered. And it was not my most shining moment.
Yeah. Well, or mine, because I probably got triggered by the trigger, and then I got defensive. And this is how couples and families run into we trip over each other's trigger. I think we talked about it. I remember that, and we found out that what happened was I sounded like something your mother would have said, or your dad, or something from the past that was someone being critical. Whew, let's go on. Okay, so what do we do? Well, we want to take action. You have to take action. This is a spiritual action, like the 4 agreements, that number 2, don't take anything personal. If you can get mindful, and we talk about this almost every week in some way in Center for Universal Oneness with different presentations, they all kind of have an underlayment of stay in that spiritual place, don't take others personally, be immune to their opinions. Well, that is an action you can take. Not always easy. I didn't even know she was going to be here, Melanie's book. When we're in that spiritual place, we're sending out those positive, smooth vibrations. I think of that, waveforms. When we're triggered, we're sending out jagged, negative ones. And what do you get back in return? Sometimes it's almost instant. You trigger the other person's trigger, and you get jaggedy back in return. Where if you stay mindful and positive, and so even in traffic, when that woman in the beginning scene was saying, what were you thinking? And there's a lot of other hand gestures people give. A lot of times you get back negative in return. Somebody hits their brakes, someone signals back, you trigger a road rage, all kinds of things can happen. So we want to stay out of that place if we can. Well, we could do that if we could meditate longer, but when a trigger happens, we don't have time. So I'm going to talk about some things you can do. I remember when I was raised Catholic, in the summer we had these little Catholic summer school catechism classes. And one time, a bunch of us kids, we were acting up, messing around, poking each other and fighting and quarreling and all that type of thing. And I remember the sister standing there. She wasn't as peaceful looking as this sister. We probably would have behaved if we'd had a pretty sister like this. She was pretty worn down by us. And I said, oh, are you praying that we'll stop? And I remember her answer. She said no, and she had a rosary and she was going through the beads. She said, I'm praying I won't overreact to you. I think, in a way she was exactly right. That for her, the prayer was a way to go into a chant or a mantra to not think about, not overreact. So that was the perfect answer. We have old-fashioned things. Some may work for you. We're going to talk later about how some of you have different ones that work for you. Count to 10. But I really think you need to find something that has positive emotion to balance it out. You go to your happy place instantly. When that trigger, you're driving in traffic, someone cuts you off, instead of motioning and gesturing to them, go to that ocean side and the beautiful sunset so that you have an emotion to cover the other emotion, because triggers are emotional. If you've got a dog, a loving dog that you have, or a cat or an animal, you just immediately bring their presence. That dog would not get triggered by anyone ignoring them, because he just wouldn't accept it. You can't ignore me. I'll just sit here lapping and smiling and licking at your feet until you pet me. And they don't take it personally. So that might be it. When I presented this one time, I had a lady say, well, I'm going to use my mule Maud as the example. I'm just going to think instant. So this lady had a small business, and she really had trouble feeling some of her employees were always creating havoc and weren't respecting her. And she would get so mad that she'd just come home enraged. And I said, well, who do you know? What image can you replace instead of being enraged or feeling so disrespected? And she said, oh, my old mule, because my old mule pays no attention to any disrespect. She just marches on, walks up to the feeder, eats her share. All the other horses are kicking and squealing and fighting and messing around, lots of drama, but Maud pays no attention to it. So that was her go-to image. So I'm suggesting to you, you come up with something that's your go-to avatar, your image that you say, when I get triggered, I'm going there to buy some time to go back to my mindful, peaceful place. One person said, she asked herself, well, what would my grandmother do? And so for her, the whole thing was around not letting anybody, her grandmother would always say, don't let anybody mess with your mind. And so for her, it was doing what grandma would do. And that was an instant way of going there. Okay, so that's the core information. In Coffee Talk, I've got a whole bunch of little do's and don'ts, and I hope you can stay and share what some of your triggers are, and better yet, how you found your way of not going there, because that's how we learn from each other. The first Unity song I heard was when we went, Melanie, I went to Unity, and actually it was Susan Williams for singing it, some of you may remember. And I'm going to have Kyle play just the first verse or two, and it's by David Pomerantz, and he wrote the song. So a lot of you in Unity and New Age know this song well, but you maybe don't know. Dave Pomerantz wrote it. He's a singer, musician. He opened for Three Dog Night, Billy Joel, quite a few famous acts. And then this was his song about finding peace. And Kyle, if you can find that, let's just play the first verse, and let's let this be kind of our meditation today. As you hear this, just kind of meditate yourself on this, and then we'll wrap up our session. So a meditation and song all roll in one. It's in everyone. We're back to that screen. What I wanted you to take from that, as we're kind of wrapping up our formal service, are those words. Because around triggers and hot buttons, that's what I think of. It's in every one of us to find our heart, gain it, retain it, stay there. Don't get triggered out of that space. You don't have to understand everything about how you got the trigger or the hot button, as long as you find a way of getting past it back to that place of peace. Now, it's an interesting intellectual thing. You say, oh, I know now where I got that. Just like Patrick, I got left out of the party at school. But you don't have to that. So those verses to me kind of focus on how we can give ourselves grace when we get triggered, and just find a way to go back to that spiritual, peaceful place. We don't have to know all the whys. We just need to get there and stay there. So thank you for joining me. I've got some do's and don'ts afterwards we'll have fun with and hear each other's secrets.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. That was, as expected, wonderful and right on point, and a way of doing spirituality that actually makes a difference in our daily lives. And I'm sure everybody's going to want to talk. So I'm just going to say thank you again, and we'll move on with the rest of our service quickly so that we can get to the coffee talk and discuss what we'd like to about what you just said.